I understand. If there's one thing I'm familiar with, it's monsters. Hello. This is me and my friend Pete, the podcast that explores all things The Amazing Spider-Man. I'm your host, Gerald. If this is your first time with us, welcome. If it isn't, welcome back. This week, we're diving into The Amazing Spider-Man number 6, Spider-Man, face to face with the Lizard. If you haven't already, please like, comment, share, and review, as your opinions, both good and bad, matter not only to me, but the curious folks outside of our listening community who may be swayed by your opinions to join in. In our community, High Society Publishing presents. Here you'll find The Vault, where we store exclusive bonus episodes covering comic books from all over the comics landscape, and The High Council, where you receive all the stories of The Vault and the ability to vote on upcoming bonus episodes of me and my friend Pete. You decide the curation. Power to the patrons. You can find all this extra bonus goodness at patreon.com/HSPP. That's patreon.com/HSPP. Sign up today. We'd love to have you. Shout out to the Right Minders, the Big Three, the Key Keepers, and the High Council. To you I say I see you, and I thank you for your support. And to you all I say, pack your bags now because the world's greatest hero is flying out. We're on a one-way trip to Crazy Town in this Amazing Spider-Man number 6, and I think there's something on the way.
Sir, would you pipe down?
Oh, yeah, JJ's coming too. But that won't stop us. We've got marauding madness on the Museum Mile. We've got fists flying fast in the Florida Everglades. We've got more alligators running wild in the Central Park Zoo after John Kruger comes through. And we've got the mighty Marvel Age of Comics beginning right here with a purple pants, poorly planned plot pursuing planetary power by none other than the Lizard himself. We've got me, we've got you, we've got no further ado. We've got the Amazing Spider-Man number 6, Spider-Man, face to face with the Lizard. Dr. Kildare, reach your heart out.
Me and my best friend Pete, old adventures, new critiques. He spins webs, I spin yarns, kinda kooky, be forewarned. Look out, it's me and my friend Pete.
So the credits for this one: the writer, Stan the Man Lee. The art is done by Steve Crowd Reaction Shot God Ditko. And the lettering was done by Art. It's in the name Simek. When I first saw this cover, I was super excited. I thought Spidey would be battling the Lizard in the subways under Manhattan. I was wrong, but happily so. We have Spider-Man here upside down in what appears to be a gray tunnel facing us, his arms dangling above his head, his web wings stretched to their limit. There is spider webbing attached to the crook of his left arm running to the top of the page, and webbing coming from his legs doing the same, making me think Spidey did this to himself to slow his fall. He has his head thrown back, and there's beautiful shading done here beneath his chin by Ditko to give depth to Spidey's head. But it gets more beautiful and dangerous. To the right of Spidey, crawling on this wall towards him on all fours, effortlessly, is the Lizard. The Lizard is exactly what his name implies, a large lizard man. I love how he's drawn here. I'm used to his mid-90s to present look that has him resembling a Tyrannosaurus Rex a lot. This lizard has a much squatter face. Every inch of him is covered in green bumpy scales. He has a heavy brow and scales surrounding his mouth where his lips should be. A long ridged tail pokes from beneath the lab coat he's wearing, curling towards the right side of the page. He honestly looks like a gecko, not to be confused with a gecko. And this gecko loves him some purple. He has a purple lab coat on, full length. There are little splashes of light blue along the collar and hem to really make the purple pop. To go along with his matching pants and eyes. His eyes are purple. The Lizard is JJP down to his irises. But sadly, the bomb purple trench coat is just for the cover, but man, is the outfit fun to look at. The Amazing Spider-Man logo is pink in this one, and beneath it, above Spidey, we get a large green caption box. It says,
"Half man, half reptile. The Lizard will take over all of Earth unless Spider-Man alone can stop him."
So here we are again with the fate of the world in the hands of the Amazing Spider-Man. Along the bottom in caps lock font, it reads, "The Marvel Age of Comics is here. Long may they reign." We turn to page 1, and this is a gorgeous page 1. I may be using the word gorgeous a lot in this one, but there are a lot of beautifully drawn panels in this to look at. It's fun to look at. Ditko was showing off so much in this issue, you love to see it, and it starts right here. It's a splash page, and as usual, we have the Spidey head logo with his name just inside the circle, and next to it, the title of the comic, Face to Face with the Lizard. All of this is written in red except for lizard, which is written in light blue with a snazzy effect surrounding the word that makes it look electrified. On the top right of this action shot, we see the lizard advancing through an opening, facing us. He's wearing a black shirt beneath his white lab coat. Quick moment, I'm convinced this lab coat is made from leather just from the way the collar is up around his face like an 80s bomber jacket, and the stitching is too detailed to just be a plain lab coat. Nobody with flair enough to wear all that purple on the cover is just going to do a cotton trench coat in the story. That's not believable at all. Once you commit to purple for the day, you go all the way fashionista. White leather trench coat? Absolutely. Back to the lizard's descending gray stone steps, a large stone column, same matching gray color on stage right beside him. It gives me the impression of a castle. The lizard's got his left hand raised above his head, his right pointed at Spidey. It's a great dynamic pose. Spidey standing to the left of the page in front of the gray column on a white ground. A large gray brick falling in front of him. Spidey's got his right fist clenched, his left hand outstretched, and his knees bent like he's backing up. Why? There are no less than 5 alligators advancing toward him on the lizard's command. 1 on either side of the lizard advancing down the stairs, and 3 advancing from an open grassy area. They're snarling and gnashing their teeth. Spidey is surrounded. Seeing this makes me immediately think of the Central Park Zoo scene from the movie Eraser, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Vanessa Williams. If you've never seen Eraser, YouTube the Central Park Zoo scene and hang on to your hat and your seat. Back to. We have a bright yellow dialogue box here that looks like it's been zapped by lightning as well, and it says, "It is common knowledge that Spider-Man is the most successful new superhero since the Fantastic Four. This, the latest and possibly the greatest of all his adventures, will show you why. The mysterious masked teenager has become America's super sensation." Along the bottom of the page in yellow it reads, "Another proud production of the Mighty Marvel Comics Group." And away we go. Page 2 opens with a caption box. It says, "A superhero is nothing without a supervillain, and our latest supervillain appears, without warning, in the murky swamps of Florida's Everglades. This is the first encounter between mankind and the lizard." And beneath this caption box, we see the lizard in the thick brush of a swamp, green-skinned, his tail curled behind him, and he's running towards 3 men, his arms raised, telling them to leave his swamp. All 3 men are freaked out. We have a man in an SJB colored jumpsuit with matching fedora. He's the closest to the lizard, and turning to run, he screams, "What is this thing?" We have another man, brown hair, orange collared shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he screams, "A giant lizard, but it talks." He doesn't look like he's gonna run though. He has his arm cocked back like if this monster rushes me, he gonna meet this left hook. And finally, in the foreground, we've got a jack dude in a green baseball cap, red shirt, and SJBs. You already know, a character's wearing red and blue, they're about that action. He grabs his rifle from a nearby tree and takes aim in panel 2, screaming, "Whatever it is, it's attacking us. Ow! Look! Bullets don't stop it!" This man took the shot and then told everybody to look. He's cold-blooded. Mind frame? We can figure out what it is at the autopsy. I think that's what he's thinking. But the bullet has no effect on the lizard, just pisses him off. He tells the trio they're going to pay for their folly and snaps a giant tree from the ground. No problem. This thing is most likely a bold cypress tree. He is in the Florida Everglades. For context, these trees can grow over 100 feet tall. The lizard's ripped it from the ground and is flexing it over his head like it's nothing. Orange shirt, the guy who had the left hook loaded, breaks stage right in the next panel, saying the lizard snapped that tree like cardboard. Red shirt, the guy with the rifle, he's not even in the panel. He's long gone. We have a red-haired guy who wandered into the wrong place, wrong time, and he's bolting. The lizard, flexing the tree above his head, calls the people running away puny humans, telling them to flee because this swamp is his now and he reigns supreme. In the next panel, if you got Ditko, you got a crowd reaction shot. And this one is of a bunch of different talking heads, just heads with nobody's making statements, as the lizard stands with his arms raised in the background. The caption box tells us that reports of the lizard and his abilities spread through the swamp, then the state, and finally the nation like wildfire. So the whole country's talking about this lizard creature, and we get to hear some of the comments. We have a red-haired woman, she's saying, "They say it walks and talks like a man." A brown-haired man, he's saying, "It has the strength of a dozen bulldozers." A guy in an olive fedora, he drops, "Bullets cannot harm it. What is it? Who is it?" And finally, a guy with dark brown hair, scared out of his wits, and he's saying, "Nobody can ever track it down. Nobody would dare invade its dog domain." I'm convinced that New York found out because that guy with the red shirt, the one who took that shot, former member of the Berber gang. He called Jesse immediately. One thing led to another, and bam, New York knows about the lizard. In the next panel, we see Bat Newsy on the corner as people walk away from him, a Daily Bugle in every pair of hands. He's wearing a purple flat cap, an orange jacket, and green pants. He's got Daily Bugles tucked under his right arm, a single issue raised in his left hand, and he's shouting, "Extra! Read all about the lizard! Extra! Extra!" And behind Bat Newsy, we see a thought bubble as Spidey thinks he wants to read the paper too, so he webs an issue of the Daily Bugle from the stack behind Bat Newsy. But Spidey's no thief. We see him leave a nickel on a separate web line for Bat Newsy. In the final panel, we see Spidey on a rooftop, the bugle in his hands as he reads the headline of the newspaper. A headline challenging him to defeat the lizard. And he says, "What kind of cornball gag is this? Every publicity man nut and his brother trying to challenge me to something or other." Called it a cornball gag. My man Spidey. But Spidey's thinking challenge accepted. We get a great shot of him flipping off of the rooftop to open page 3, a web line clutched in his left hand as he monologues out loud, letting us know he's going to change out of his Spidey costume and go see Jameson, hoping Jameson will send Parker to Florida for pics of the lizard. A few minutes later, we see Pete in the corner office of J. Jonah Jameson pleading his case. Pete's wearing his SJB suit with a white button-up, red tie and white tie clip, and his horn-rimmed glasses. And JJ's stunning. He's got on a green suit, white button-up with a rust orange tie and tie clip. JJ's Widow Peak has Pete's beat today. It's pointy. We can tell Pete already asked to be sent to Florida because JJ is, of course, tirading. He says, "You're out of your mind, Parker. I just printed that challenge headline to sell papers. The lizard is probably just a phony anyway. I'm not paying for you to waste time." And Pete's like, "Okay, but what if Spidey accepts your challenge and fights him and we're there? That's a scoop. That's donuts, JJ." And JJ says, "Please, if the lizard really existed, Spider-Man would never go to fight him because he'd rather stay in New York fighting punks for easy rep." He called Spidey a punk. He was there when Spidey brought the Sandman out in a dirt body bag in ASM number 4. Selective memory is real right now. Jameson saying all this as Pete has his back to him, thinking, "I knew Hatchetface would say no." Pete exits JJ's office and runs into Betty Brant. She's in monochrome today, shade, heartthrob red on both her high-collared blouse and skirt with large black pearl earrings. I really like the way Ditko drew her hair in this issue, high and curly, it's very cool. Betty sees Pete exiting JJ's office and says it's too bad JJ won't send Pete to Florida to cover the lizard. She thinks it'd be a real scoop. And Pete says, "Thanks, Betty. I sure wish you were the publisher instead of just being his secretary." And he says this while JJ is standing directly behind him. Pete wants the man to hear him. The next day, we find Pete on Museum Mile, location, Museum of Natural History. We see the Goldenrod Kid, SJB suit and black turtleneck, and he's just walked into the Tyrannosaurus exhibit. And Pete's come to study. Even if he can't go to Florida, he's thinking it won't hurt him to learn more about lizards, just in case. And he's decided to start with the giants, the big boys, the dinosaurs. He walks into an exhibit hall where a lecturer is talking to a small crowd, and the lecturer is saying if dinosaurs' intelligence matched their size, they'd still be alive today, as he gestures towards a massive skeleton of a T-Rex in front of him. The T-Rex is on the 4th floor of the museum in Dinosaur Hall. That's a fun fact. That's a true fact. You can't miss it. Just follow the head of the Titanosaur into the room. Back 2. While Pete's daydreaming, he's spotted by Flash, fashion on who's out on a date with Liz Allen. And Flash has a dope black sweater on with neon pink stripes running horizontally across his chest. He's trying to impress Liz. Go ahead, got the S-curl working and everything. Get him, Thompson. The brand that Cookie Monster is in the building. And Liz has kept it simple and clean as usual. A green dress, her hair in a ponytail, every hair in its place. Jerking his thumb over his shoulder, Flash tells Liz to look. Of course they'd find the bookworm here. But Liz tells Flash to hush. And that seems like a strange word for a kid to use, but who knows? Liz may have an old soul. Anyway, she hushes Flash, saying she's trying to listen to the lecturer. Flash insults Pete here, calling him a bookworm and saying he's not surprised he found Pete here, but he's here too, so what is he talking about? The lecturer continues, telling the group that no gun smaller than a cannon can hurt a dinosaur's hide. While he's saying this, Pete's spidey sense goes off. He looks over his shoulder at the door. Who does he spot walking into Dinosaur Hall? Skinny Pete and Badger, of course. The Berber gang is in the building. Skinny Pete's on the heavy green today, his suit jacket and pants are green, and the band on his black cap is too. While Badger went a little snazzier, this is 1963, a day out at the museum is a big deal. He's wearing a tan suit and a maroon newsboy cap with matching bow tie. Dressed to impress, I respect it. Skinny Pete says to Badger, "No one saw us take the idol's ruby, now let's scram!" Letting us know they've just nicked a precious gem. In the final panel, we hear the lecturer continuing his speech to Flash and Liz, telling them that dinosaurs could live in and out of water and crush a modern-day tank. They do not realize at all what's going on. While Pete thinks he has to follow the Burb gang, Skinny notices Pete staring and says, "Don't like the way that kid's looking at us." To which Badger replies, "Me neither. Come on." Page 4 opens to Skinny and Badger watching our friend Pete walk through an emergency exit. Skinny says, I was just being paranoid. Look, he's leaving. And Badger, reaching into his jacket and showing Skinny a pistol, says, lucky for him. If he came any closer, I'd have let him have it. He was going to kill a kid in a museum to preserve his identity. Badger is cold. They're saying this, but they don't know that kid is ducking out the back exit so he can change it to Spider-Man. In no time at all, we're in the next panel and Spidey is suited and booted, adjusting his Spider-Man mask on his face. You know he's monologuing. He says he's learned all he needed to know about dinosaurs. Stopping the Burba gang is going to be a lot more fun. Spidey leaps onto the roof and heads back towards Dinosaur Hall, but stops at the frame of the door leading into the room. And things have gotten real fast. Peeking into the room, Spidey thinks, uh-oh, what's the commotion out there? It's the guards. He's chasing those two. He saw them steal something, but they pulled a gun. Seized one of the kids. It's Liz. We move to the next panel and Badger and Skinny Pete have both pulled out their pistols. Skinny is holding Liz roughly by the shoulder, and Badger's got his gun drawn on the security guard who's just rushed in. Skinny says, okay, so you saw us grab that ruby, but we're getting out of here anyway, and we're taking this gal with us for protection. And Liz is not ready to meet her maker. She screams for everyone to let them go because the men seem desperate. All the men in the room not holding guns freeze. The security guard steps to the side of the door frame, telling the Burbas they won't get away with this, as Spidey agrees silently to himself. We move on to the next panel and see Spidey crouched on the sheer wall above the door frame about to make his move. He's monologuing, of course, giving the game away, and he says it's funny how Flash Thompson isn't doing anything in this moment. But Flash is just a kid, Pete. Sheesh, he hasn't been kissed by the Atom, but who cares? Spidey has, and shouting, but Bookworm Parker has a few tricks up his little sleeve. He leaps from the sheer wall and onto the next panel, landing between the Burba gang and Liz. Props to Liz, she got rid of her shoes in this moment. She's ready to make a break as soon as the opportunity arises. She leaps out of the way as Spidey tells the Burba gang they haven't seen the most interesting exhibit yet, i.e. Spider-Man. Nice. You already know Badger ain't the heart of the group. He screams at Spider-Man while Skinny wonders aloud what they're going to do next. And in the final panel, Spidey responds. He throws a vicious 2-for-1 hook, clocking both Skinny Pete and Badger across the jaw, quipping, I'll answer that question. You hit my angry little fist with your big strong chins. Like this. I like this quip. Reminds me of another one. Apologize to me for hitting my fist with your face like that, and I wouldn't be surprised if I got that one from the webhead. Back 2. Spidey's knocked Badger's lights out. My man has the UFC KO arms, stiff and locked in front of him. His head thrown back. Skinny ain't doing any better. His elbows are bent back. His jaw is facing north. Never the position you want to be in a fight, and both men are airborne. Spidey made them honorary members of the 101 with one swing, and he's so fast, he breaks toward Liz and catches her in his arms before she hits the floor. And Liz is in shock. She says, wow, you saved me, and Spidey says the pleasure was all his. Smooth with it. He shoots a web to the ceiling and swings off, thinking to himself that he's enough of a show-off to enjoy moments like this, but he has to change back to Pete Parker before anybody wonders where he is. A few minutes later, we see Pete walking back into Dinosaur Hall as Flash stands behind Liz trying to get her attention. But she is in a whole different zone. Flash says, Liz, come on, snap out of it. This is Flash. Don't you remember me? But Liz replies, Flash? Flash who? All I can remember are Spider-Man's strong arms around me. My man Pete has saved the day and gained the favor of the girl he wants. He walks up to Liz and Flash, and Liz is still savoring the moment. She says Spidey called her blue eyes and she'll never forget it. While Flash, looking over his shoulder at Pete, says, nuts. Competition like you I can handle, Parker, but what do I do about Spider-Man? And Pete gives the Brand X kid the honest truth. Just one thing, pal. Worry. That's it. We have the kid with the transistor radio from ASM number 7 walking past randomly. This is the second time I've seen him, so I'm going to call him Radio from now on. He's got light brown hair and a brown shirt on, and we over here from the radio. The nation wonders why Spider-Man has avoided going after the lizard. So the whole country wants the sensation of the nation to take on the lizard. Pete overhears this and he's overheard enough. He thinks he has to find some way to get Jameson to send him to Florida. Shortly after, we see how. The next panel, we see Jameson sitting at his desk, and we see Spidey's hand open the window before he clicks on his Spidey symbol light, illuminating the top of JJ's desk. JJ sees the Spidey head and wonders aloud who it is, and Spidey says, well, it's not Fats Domino. Fats Domino, the African-American great, is credited as one of the pioneers of rock and roll and also credited by many as making the very first rock and roll hit single, The Fat Man. Elvis Presley, the guy they called the king, called Fats the King. and Fats didn't disappoint. His music helped to thin the thick, ugly, and persistent line of racism in America. He constantly responded to anyone who told him that he invented rock and roll, that this was music he'd been playing all his life in New Orleans, and a king who walked amongst his people he was, living almost his entire life, even after success, in his 9th Ward neighborhood of New Orleans until Hurricane Katrina destroyed his home. I'm a huge fan of his song Blue Monday that chronicles the hardest day of the work week with a simple message of, hey man, Mondays suck, and Tuesdays too maybe, but time moves forward and it'll be Friday in no time. This goes back to my point that Spidey as Spider-Man is on the scene, hanging out on the roofs of jazz clubs, dropping the cover charts down on web lines, and hanging on a sheer wall, taking in all the greatest music of the time. Spidey is a scene kid. He loves the music. Back 2. So Spidey's belt light lights up JJ's desk, and JJ, taking no chances, reaches for his phone to call security. But Spidey webs up the button saying, hands off your intercom, Jonah, old chum. Let's keep this nice and private. This is low-level harassment and breaking and entering, and I'm sure Jameson is feeling violated. In the final panel, he springs from his desk and breaks for his office door, screaming that he's got to get help. But Spidey webs his whole back, stopping the man in his tracks, asking JJ where's his hospitality. You gotta make time for the niceties, JJ. Page 6 opens with JJ suspended from his ceiling in front of his desk. Spidey is upside down, holding a web for support. So Spidey's upside down, JJ's right side up, but he and JJ are face to face. Spidey tells JJ that after all the editorials, TV spots, and lecture tours, he's beginning to think the paper magnate doesn't like him very much. And JJ barks to be let down. Let me down. Spidey flips right side up, sitting on his webbing in a gorgeous panel, and asks JJ what's the rush. He tells JJ he's accepting the Lizard's challenge, and if JJ wants to see what the Amazing Spider-Man is all about, he better send a photographer down to Florida. He goes on to say, as for my whale, it'll loosen in a minute and you'll come down. Boy, will you come down! We get another great panel of Spidey web swinging through JJ's office window as he thinks to himself that JJ has to send Peter Parker to Florida now. And if he doesn't, Spidey can't go. He beats himself up a little bit, saying that he's a superhero too broke to buy a plane ticket, but all those other heroes are funded, so that's not a fair comparison. But the grass is always greener on the other side. The next panel, we're back in JJ's office and Betty Brant has just entered the room. She's in monochrome pink today and she's staring up at JJ with her hand near her mouth as JJ screams, Miss Brant, stop gaping and call Peter Parker. I want to see him here at once. But first, put some soft cushions on the floor under me. Betty screams, yes sir, and heads out. The next panel, we get another beautiful panel. This page is beautiful. Check it out if you can. This panel is of Pete looking over his shoulder on a rooftop across the street from the Daily Bugle. He's putting his street clothes back on, and we hear a loud crash in JJ's office, letting us know Spidey's webbing has dissolved. JJ screams, ow! Never mind those asterisk, exclamation point, question mark, plus sign, exclamation point cushions. So he used a much more vibrant word. As Pete says, poor gentle Jonah with a wicked grin on his face. Exactly 5 minutes later, we see Pete as the Goldenrod Kid back in the Daily Bugle offices. He's leaning with his arm on a filing cabinet, his hand propping up his face, and he's speaking to Betty, who's sitting at her desk. She exclaims, Peter, where have you been? Mr. Jameson has been looking everywhere for you. And Pete gets clever. He says, no wonder he didn't find me. I haven't been everywhere. Before walking over to Betty's desk and leaning towards her, saying he's been wanting to ask her something. Betty has a hand to her collar as she asks, yes, Peter? So you know, and I know, that the Goldenrod Kid is about to kick game like Messi. Before he can, however, Jameson opens the door of his office and blocks a shot like Gianluigi Buffon, screaming for Pete to come into the office now. The next panel, we see Pete, comfortable in his black turtleneck look as he sits perched on JJ's desk. JJ's quirky. He's a busy man. If you're in his office, you may be busy, but you're not quite busy enough. He'll fire a whole office for not getting pics of the Vulture, an almost impossible task at the time, but he'll let a freelance photographer put his rump on his desk. Strange man, that JJ. Back 2. He's puffing a cigar, his back is to Pete, and he says, I changed my mind. You're going to Florida after all because the Bugle needs pics of the Lizard and Spider-Man. And Pete's like, cool, I'm with it. When do I go? So Pete got what he wanted. He's excited. He's on his way to Florida. He's going to challenge the Lizard. The nation's been calling him out. I am the sensation of the nation. You call me out, I answer. Gotta give the people what they want. Beyonce is in the building right now. This is not about superheroing. My adoring fans want me. Egos all over the place. In the final panel, however, we get a scowling JJ pointing a finger at a surprised Pete. Why is Pete surprised? Because JJ's going too. Page 7 opens and JJ's ditched a cigar and lit a cigarette. The man is chain smoking. Spidey has rattled his nerves. JJ says he's not taking any chances on Pete messing up and that he could use a trip to Florida, so that's why he's going along. Of course, Pete wonders how he's going to keep switching from Spidey to Peter Parker with JJ around before saying he'll have to get permission from his Aunt May. The caption box says minutes later, which seems way too fast to get from the Bugle to Queens, but Spidey web swings at over 100 miles per hour, so I'll suspend disbelief. And we see Pete in the washroom with Aunt May. She's ironing a collared shirt, probably for Pete, and she's wearing her purple dress, so we have Queen May today. And I'm beginning to suspect Pete may have gotten some of his neuroses from his Aunt May. He tells her he's going to Florida and she says, "You want to go to Florida? With that horrible lizard running loose down there?" "Oh no, Peter, it's out of the question." And Pete cops a plea ASAP. He says JJ's going with him, that he's going to be safe, he's going to be fine. And May has a lot of trust in JJ, plus she knows about the Donuts and Dimes account, so she changes her mind immediately. She says Pete can go because she knows JJ will take care of him, and Pete says, "He's like a big fat guardian angel, Aunt May." The next day, we see Pete and JJ at the airport. Pete's got on his SJB suit and a red tie. He's wearing his horn-rimmed glasses and is holding papers and a large envelope in his right hand. Jameson has on the same green suit, same red striped tie from yesterday. I'm not sure I mentioned it before. It's a nice tie and a purple fedora. They're walking towards the silver plane they'll be flying in, and JJ asks Pete what he's carrying. Pete responds, and he says that he's carrying newspaper clippings and maps, and all of these things are concerned with the lizard. The maps are for where he's been located, where he's been spotted, and the clippings are for what this guy is about, what people are saying he is. Pete's doing his homework. Foggy Nelson. The two board the plane and they take their seats, continuing the conversation. JJ says,
"Glad to see you're thinking ahead, Parker. You haven't sold me too many sensational pictures lately. You better not disappoint me this time."
And Pete thanks old brother and focuses on his clippings. He spots a column on a page with a headline reading Reptile Expert. There's a picture of a Dr. Curtis Connors beneath the headline. Handsome guy, high cheekbones, cleft chin, and Pete thinks this is awesome. A reptile expert who lives in the Everglades. I can ask him for help. They land in Florida and Pete immediately dishes JJ, telling him he has to buy fresh film and equipment. And JJ, busy man that he is, snaps. He says,
"Make it snappy. Why didn't you buy that junk in New York instead of doing it here on my time?"
Pete doesn't respond. I imagine he's thinking, "I'm a busy man, JJ. If you can't web swing with me, you might not be busy enough." I imagine that's what he's thinking. And in the final panel, we see Spidey, suited and booted for the first time in Florida. Spidey's thinking that he didn't get the equipment before he left New York, because if he did, he wouldn't have time to change it to Spider-Man. Spidey's first foray into the Florida Everglades is a go.
Me and my best friend Pete, old adventures, new critiques. He spins webs, I spin yarns. Kinda kooky, be forewarned. Look out, it's me and my friend Pete.
We've come back just in time to find Spidey on page 8, and Spider-Man's wasted no time. We see him, first panel, descending upside down towards a dirt road guarded by one police officer. The next panel, we see him soar above the officer, no problem, into the Everglades. But Spidey's been spotted, hiding behind a nearby tree, the lizard. And he sees Spidey, and after reading all the newspapers he scavenged, scaring people off, he probably knows the nation wants him and Spidey to shoot the fair one. So he thinks,
"Enemy coming. Must hide. Then attack."
We see Spidey next, trudging through the swampland, monologuing, of course. He says, "I don't like it. It's too quiet here. Unnaturally quiet. It's a creepy feeling." I don't think screaming out loud is going to make it better. Whatever you're afraid of, they're going to hear you, Spidey. Next, we get a great panel of Spidey from the waist down, moving through the swamp past a small pool of water. He says his Spidey sense is starting to tingle, but he doesn't see anything. We do, however. In the water, we see a purple iris eye surrounded by green skin before the lizard shoots an arm out from the water and grabs Spidey around the ankle. And Spidey, screaming he can't keep his balance, is pulled into the pool. We see him and the lizard underwater struggling until Spidey thinks, "Lizard or not, a glob of mud pushed in his face ought to slow him down a little," before grabbing mud from the shallow end of the pool and flinging it into the lizard's face. In the final panel, we see both superpowered beings crawling from the water, watching each other. Spidey thinks he still can't figure out who or what this guy is. Whoever or whatever he is, his leather lab coat is spotless despite just having mud tossed all over him. That's high fashion. Page 9 opens and we got ourselves a good old-fashioned standoff. Lizard, his back to us, says,
"Swampland is mine. I have warned the world, but you dared to invade my domain, and so you are doomed."
To which Spidey replies, Sure. Every time I turn around, I get doomed by someone else." Dr. Doom himself tried to doom Spidey and it didn't take. It never takes. And my people, we got action. Lizard doesn't do too much talking. He sends his tail speeding towards Spidey, who jumps straight up to avoid it. The tail crashes into the base of the tree behind Spidey, sending the tree toppling to the ground, while Spidey thinks the lizard is fast. And he was barely able to dodge. Close enough to really observe the lizard now, he realizes this isn't a trick or a gimmick. This man is a full-fledged lizard. Spidey thinks he has to knock the lizard around a little bit to take some of the fight out of him, and falling, grabs the lizard's tail with both hands. But this proves to be a bad idea. The lizard, with a mighty whip of his tail, sends Spidey flying. This is another beautiful panel. We see Spidey soaring through the air back from the force of the swing, his arms outstretched, his legs together as he thinks, "Suffering spider webs! He's a dozen times stronger than I thought!" I want to know where Spidey came up with that number. He's exactly 12 times stronger than I thought he'd be. Spidey's got a built-in power level scouter apparently, and the lizard is clocking over 9K. We see Spidey flying head over feet above the trees of the Everglades, screaming, "Boy, when I make a mistake, it's a beaut! Look out below!" He lands in a tree in the next panel, and sitting on a branch to collect himself, he gasps before realizing the lizard flung him almost half a mile. That's almost 9 football fields. No problem. The lizard didn't come to talk. Spidey looks around and after getting his bearings, realizes he's close to Dr. Kirk Connor's house, the lizard expert, the reptile expert. So Spidey thinks he should stop in. In the next panel, we see Spidey on the gray sheer wall outside of the house. Peering through the window, he spots a woman sitting on the edge of a bed, a handkerchief to her face, and she's crying. Spidey thinks he has to warn her how near the lizard is before realizing she's in tears. Without bothering to knock, Spidey completely invades the woman's privacy, crawling into the window. He doesn't see Kirk Connors anywhere around, but there's a picture on a table nearby facing us, so we know this is his home. Despite the man being gone, Spidey still thinks he has to warn the woman before she looks up and sees him creeping into the window. She screams, "Spider-Man," and he's like, I swear, I'm not a creep, I'm here to help, I'm here to help. And in the final panel, we get a close-up of the blonde woman. She still has the handkerchief to her face, and tears are still streaming down her cheeks. She's wearing a blue dress and a blue blouse. Spidey standing behind her says, "Look, I just wanted to talk to your husband, get his advice on some reptiles, but bump all of that noise right now because you gotta go. The lizard is nearby." And the woman tells Spidey, wiping her tears, that he doesn't understand. Page 10 opens and we see Spider-Man holding the picture of Kirk Connors, and this is the strangest photograph I've ever seen. On the lower right of the picture, beneath his winning smile, on the front, Kirk Connors has signed the picture like an autograph to his wife. Like his wife is a fan of his that he met at a book signing. Strange man, that Kirk Connors, but it gets stranger as Mrs. Connors tells Spidey that her husband, Dr. Kirk Connors, is the lizard. In the next panel, she begins the tale of how Curtis became the lizard in a caption box above the panel. She says her husband was a surgeon who lost his arm during the war. This is 63, so I assume she means World War II. It ended in 45, 18-year difference. That fits. Before I continue, they never give us Mrs. Connors' first name, and I do my best to just go along with the story and let things reveal as they go, but seeing how long we had to wait to get Liz's name, and she's an everyday character, I don't think it's fair to Martha Connors to call her Mrs. Connors through all of this as if she's just an extension and not her own character. There are a lot of things wrong with Silver Age comics. One of the biggest things wrong with them is the fact that people get marginalized. Women in these stories get marginalized. We haven't seen any real black people yet. I know when they're coming and I'm super excited, but we haven't seen any real black people of substance or credit yet in these comics. And I love them, but it needs to be said. And seeing how long it took for Liz Allen's name to be revealed, I'm not going to have a woman character just be Mrs. Connors as if she's only an extension of Kirk Connors. So her name is Martha Connors, and I'll just be calling her Martha. I won't give away anything else, but her name is Martha Connors. We get Kirk Connors' name, we get their son Billy's name, and we don't get Martha Connors' name. That's not cool, so she will be Martha. Sorry for the spoiler for anyone who's really listening to these as fun and discoverable things, but sometimes you can't go by the timeline that's listed because the timeline is very much living in the world that it's in. And in this world, women are treated very secondary, so I don't want her to just be an attachment of Kirk Connors. She is her own person. Back to. So Martha goes on to say that her husband went on to study reptiles after losing his arm and became one of the world's leading authorities on the subject. Reptiles. Not losing your arm. In the panel, we see Kurt and his wife in his lab. He's holding a sheet of paper up to her with his left hand. The right sleeve of his lab coat is pinned over on itself because his right arm is gone. There's a chemistry set in front of them, books lining the walls, and what appears to be a stuffed reptile on the shelf. And Kurt's telling his wife, if a lower order of life, such as certain types of lizards, lose a leg, or any base extremity, they often simply grow a new one. In the next panel, we get an up-close shot of the dashing Dr. Kirk Connors as he says a man could regrow their limbs, eyes, even a heart. He says he's got to find the secret. Martha, beaming behind Kurt, says, "Oh, Curtis, if only you could." And I don't know, that seemed a little shady to me, like she's been waiting for him to do this for years now and he's been trying and he's had no results. If only you could? How about if anyone can, you can, babe? But she's not required to say that. She said what she said. The next scene, Martha continues saying Kurt was a good husband and father, that their son Billy adored him, and so did she. Beneath her words, we see Kurt in panel at his lab table, his son Billy, blonde boy wearing an orange short sleeve, striped shirt, and he asks Kurt what he's working on now, and Kurt says something that will make Billy proud and help all mankind. We see Kurt holding a red round-bottom flask in his hand. A rabbit is in a cage in front of him, and he's saying his experimental lizard formula worked. The rabbit was missing a leg, and after drinking the formula, grew it back within the hour. And Kurt Connors takes this as an an immediate excuse to break the cardinal rule of science and test the formula on himself. In the next panel, we see him say, "Now, all that remains is for me to try it on a human. And what better subject can there be than myself?" As he raises the formula to his lips, draining it. We have Martha in panel with her back to us in a red shirt, and she's asking if Kurt's sure this is safe before shouting his name. Martha continues her story, saying Kurt drank the serum before she could stop him. And we see Kurt, his face cast in shadow, clutching his right arm. He's screaming that he feels a strange sensation, like life returning. Before we see him, a wide smile on his face in the final panel exclaiming, "I've done it! I've grown a new arm!" As he stares down at his returned right arm. What a doctor that Kurt Connors is. But page 11 opens to disaster striking. Martha says, "But the chains didn't end there. No, the hand, the arm, all of Curtis Connors began to change until, under the caption box, we get a panel of Kurt's right hand, which has now become light green and scaly. You know disaster has struck because the lizard is the first person in Amazing Spider-Man to have a close-up on his hands, and his manicure is fried. In seconds, his whole body is covered in green scales, head to foot. Martha screams, "What is it? What's wrong?" But Kurt, the dashing doctor, is frantic. He turns his back to Martha, throwing up two large scaly hands. His skin is now a Sacramento green, and his face, that once Hollywood visage with the high cheekbones and cleft chin, shattered, replaced by the head of a Komodo dragon. He screams, "No, no, stay away, don't look at me, don't!" and tears off into the Florida swamps while Martha stands in the doorframe of their home screaming his name. But the dashing doctor wasn't done. He returned the next day, hoping to create a second serum, but Martha says his brain was, quote, "too dulled, too changed." We see the lizard smashing the equipment at Kurt Connors' lab desk, and he's saying, "Cannot do it, must give up." A man who spent all those years coming up with the serum to regrow his arm is now, after one attempt, completely abandoning his attempt to cure himself. I'll tell you what happened. He ran off into the swamp in tears, but like any good scientist, started experimenting with what he could do and found he was better than he was before losing his arm. I think this doctor, Curtis Kildare Connors, loves being the lizard, and this is all an act. The man runs around signing headshots to his own wife. He loves being the lizard, but he's going to ham it up anyway. He sits down at his writing desk and pulls out a sheet of stationery. Stationery I'm sure reads, "From the desk of Curtis Kildare Connors." And with his leather lab coat's collars pulled up around his chin like he's the Fonz from Happy Days and a solitary crocodile tear running from his purple eye, he writes, "Take Billy, leave, never come back." The man turned himself into a monster, and instead of relegating himself to a life of an outcast like the noble Bruce Banner with the Hulk, he tells Martha to leave with Billy and never come back. What's better than being a giant lizard? Being a giant lizard who keeps the house and has the whole swamp at his backyard. He writes this note out with his right hand. Even if he was only a lefty because of losing his arm, why not write the note out with the penmanship his wife is used to seeing? I'll tell you why. Because this isn't a note begging her to leave as a precaution, it's a letter telling her to leave or else. Back to. We see Spidey and Martha together in the next panel. They're in the Connors' living room as Martha concludes her story. We see frames on the wall. The Connors have some great drapes, yellow with black polka dots. When we hear someone scream "Mommy" from off panel. Of course, this is Billy. Martha says she thought he was taking a nap. Spidey leaps into action and out of the window in the next panel using his Spidey sense to guide him to Billy. We get a caption box in the next panel. It reads, "Meanwhile, not far away, the terrified boy races through the swamp, having seen a sight which seemed to be out of a nightmare." And we see the lizard partly hidden behind a large tree. Billy, orange shirt, SJB's brown loafers, is running in the opposite direction. He's booking it, screaming for help, as the lizard apologizes. So maybe I was wrong. In the final panel, the lizard has come from behind the tree, his right hand raised in a fist, and he's shouting at Billy to come back. But Billy is paralyzed with fear in the ankle-deep grass. A large green snake with an orange belly is slithering towards him, and maybe this is a ring-necked snake, and Billy knows he can't get out of its way in time. But Spidey swoops in on a web line to start page 12, scooping Billy up just in time. The lizard watches all of this at first before leaping up and grabbing Spider-Man's arm, shouting, "No one can take Billy from him. You just stood here watching. What are you thinking? What are you doing? I am mid-swing. I could drop this kid. Get off me, you idiot." Spidey drops Billy off on a tree branch and tells the kid to stay there and hang on. "I gotta go to work." Spidey lands into the next panel and clocks in, giving the lizard a right across the jaw that gives a great thud, written in blue and curved above the lizard's head. It was a great punch, but Spidey thinks, "Ow! His skin is hard as a dinosaur's armor. I almost broke my hand, and he hardly felt it." Spidey leaps back and thinks if fists don't work, there's always the shooters. He sprays a blast from his right hand towards the lizard's face, but the lizard, whipping his tail around, snaps the webbing sprayed towards him easily, like paper, Spidey says. Paper! The next panel, we hear Martha screaming to Billy, asking where he is, and the lizard takes this as a chance to escape. He dives into nearby swamp water and swims away, not a stain on his leather lab coat. Spidey bends down beside the pool in the next panel as Billy and Martha walk up. The caption box tells us it's been a few minutes, and I guess Spidey was watching the lizard swim away while Billy had to find a way down from the tree himself. Spidey must think the lizard is fascinating, but focus, Spidey. Martha asks did Spidey see her husband, and Spidey says yeah, but he's becoming less human by the minute. Billy doesn't care about any of this. Smiling, he says, "Mommy, that man saved me." The next panel, Spidey's throwing Billy onto his right shoulder and all three are walking back to the house. Billy says he knows who Spider-Man is and Spidey says that's right. He says he's taking them home and tells Martha that he wants to view C.K. Connor's notes before it's too late. In the final panel, Spidey's doing his homework. He's at C.K.'s desk pouring over the doctor's notes as Martha brings him everything she can find. Billy is looking on and he asks Spidey if he's a scientist too. We don't see if Spidey answers Billy, but we turn the page and it's hours later. Spidey is at Kurt's desk, all his backup equipment pulled from storage and set up on the table. Glass beakers, vials, etc. Martha has a hand to her face with a look that says, this Spider-Man's got some scientific moves. I like it. As Spidey drops a small tablet from his left hand into a vial he's holding in his right. Billy is nowhere to be found, and Spidey's answering the kid's question about him being a scientist to Martha. He's already left the kid up in a tree and didn't give him an answer to a direct question, but says to Martha, "We'll soon find out if I'm a scientist or not. I'll drop a pellet of the compound I created into this test tube. When it hits the solution within, if it turns green, then I succeeded in finding the antidote. Here goes." And in the next panel, we see old savant Spidey has done it again as the clear liquid in the vial turns an emerald green. Spidey says once the lizard drinks this serum, he'll revert to Kirk Connors again, but Spidey has a problem. In the next panel, he's wondering aloud how he's going to get the lizard to drink it. In the foreground, Martha, her eyes wide, a perfectly manicured hand near her lips, has the answer. She screams, "Spider-Man, look!" We see the lizards enter the room, and again, suspicious. He's turned the knob and walked in, not burst through the door, not crashed through the window. Turned the knob, walked in. If being the lizard was really slowly deteriorating his mind, why is he still turning these knobs? He's protecting his investment. He wants that house. He shouts,
"You are the only one who does not fear me. Once I destroy you, all mankind will tremble before the lizard."
Before snapping his giant tail towards Spider-Man in the next panel. Spidey, putting himself between Martha and the lizard immediately, hands the test tube to Martha saying he's got to reason with the lizard, but Martha doesn't think he can. She screams, quite literally, "You can't! He grows less human each minute. He doesn't even seem to know me now." So the lizard doesn't even recognize Martha anymore, in her opinion. But the lizard is a great actor. I don't believe any of this. The plot thickens. The lizard says finally he sees fear in Spider-Man's eyes because Spidey's realized that the lizard can end his life. He picks up the entire laboratory desk like it's nothing, hurling it at the webhead, telling Spidey his skin and muscles are way stronger than Spidey's. And Spidey, trying to dodge, thinks the lizard is right. He's just tossed a 1, maybe 200-pound desk like it's nothing. The lizard presses his advantage. While Spidey's trying to dodge, the lizard is moving so fast that all we see is the end of his battering. His tail smashing into Spidey's chest as our hero crashes into a bookshelf, sending both the shelf and the desk falling down on top of him. The caption box on the next panel reads,
"Within a few savage seconds, the unequal battle is ended."
A few savage seconds. We see Spidey's left hand laying limp beneath the debris of the shelf and desk as the lizard walks away in shadow saying,
"Now there is none to stop me. Now I am supreme. All I need to do is feed my serum to other lizards, crocodiles, alligators. I'll build a mighty lizard army."
Where did this plan come from? The lizard said earlier he couldn't find a way to cure himself, but he discovered his serum can turn other lizards into a super lizard super army? What is going on? In the final panel on this page, we see that the lizard, like so many others, underestimated the old webhead. Martha, pulling wood off of Spidey, says, "Thank heavens you're alive." And Spidey, half covered in splintered wood, half covered in the stink of defeat, says, "He knocked the wind out of me for a minute. He's stronger than I had guessed." Knocked Spidey out for a moment. We see Martha in the foreground to open page 14, and she's saying, "It is not only his drift that was affected, but his brain. He plans to inject his serum in giant lizards, making them like he is, creating a savage, super powerful lizard army." So the lizard must have told Martha this while Spidey was unconscious, and Spidey screams, "Do you realize how many lizards there are on Earth? Mankind wouldn't stand a chance." Neuroses right away. "She's just the bearer of bad news, Spidey. You gotta chill." In the next panel, Spidey, a hand on his hip, says the lizard has gotta be stopped quick because if the first super lizard is created, there will be no way to stop the spread of others. They'll multiply too fast to be checked. Martha hands Spidey the antidote, asking him how he'll get the lizard to drink it. And Spidey says, "I don't know yet, but I gotta find him first. You two stay here." And Martha's like, "He is stronger than you. and he has become ruthless. Perhaps you should get help. So I'm starting to think Martha's life experiences have given her a glass half empty motive. She waited all those years for Kirk Connors to figure out a way to regrow his arm. So she started to doubt that he could do it. And then when he did, he turned into a monster. And now Spidey's saying that he's going to take the lizard by himself. And how can you? He's faster, bigger, and stronger. Why are these men not thinking? I think she probably feels like she's the only voice of reason in this testosterone-filled world of idiots who just want to punch things to submission. In the next panel, Spidey replies saying there isn't any time to get help. Whatever has to be done by him alone. He creates a pair of swamp shoes out of webbing. They look like snowshoes, but gray and flat and webbed. And grabbing a large tree branch to use as a gondola pole, goes off in search of the lizard. Billy, Martha's arms over his shoulders, tells Spidey not to hurt his dad. The next panel, great panel, we see the one-man Florida gondola, the Amazing Spider-Man, and he is floating easily down the Florida Everglades. A tree branch cuts through this panel with knotted branches. It's so cool. As Spidey floats through the swamp, he thinks that Billy is right. That C.K. Connors, MD, is a decent and talented man, so he doesn't want to hurt him, but how can he defeat the lizard without one of them getting hurt? The lizard is the sturdiest villain Spidey's ever faced from a durability standpoint, and he doesn't know what to do. But Spidey's going to find him though, and using his Spidey sense as a guide, Spidey continues along the river until he comes to an old Spanish fort. His Spidey sense is going wild now, and Spidey thinks this brown brick fort must be the place, and begins climbing the fort's tower, giving the game away. He's saying, "And now for the showdown." I love that. In the final panel, we see Spidey's large left eye and fingertips poking from around the curve in the tower as he spots the lizard, wondering if he's arrived too late. The caption box to open page 15 says, "The scene is so amazing, so fraught with drama, that Spider-Man takes a few fast pictures of it as he frantically tries to plan his next move." And we see Spidey, camera in hand, still sticking to the sheer outer wall of the tower. On the grassy swampland beneath him, the lizard is surrounded by 4 large alligators that aren't attacking him. Spidey thinks the alligators must be obedient to the lizard somehow. Most people have dogs, the lizard's got gators. The next panel zooms in on the lizard as he speaks to his pets, as he calls them. And he starts monologuing something fierce. He says, "We shall be the first of Earth's new rulers. The humans will have no place to run, no place to hide from us. For the lizards are part of the reptile family, which includes you, the snakes, and all the crawling hordes. Think of the countless millions of reptiles in these Everglades alone. Once I spill my serum in the murky waters, nothing will stop the birth of a new race of lizard creatures." Proving every reptile people conspiracy theorist right. Ascending the stairs to the fort, he goes on to say that he's going to rule all of these lizards as their master and tells the gators to follow him while he goes to make the serum. He hasn't even made the serum yet! Spidey, hearing the lizard hasn't even begun to do anything except talk to himself, thinks this is great and prepares to make his move. But a brick comes loose, then several more. They fall to the ground, Spidey not far behind them thinking, "I'm falling!" Well, this was my first problem. The problem of when to attack. Looks like it's now or never. Meanwhile, Lizard turns to the sound and spotting Spidey falling to the ground is shocked he's still alive while the hungry gator gnashes its teeth beside him. In the final panel, we see Spidey at the base of the column, low to the earth on his tiptoes with his right hand pressed against the ground. Great dynamic shot as the lizard screams, "Get him, my pets! Spider-Man must never leave here alive!" From the top of a set of stairs, we see 3 alligators descending the stairs, so we know we're in that action shot from page 1. We turn the page, and we got action. Spidey leaps from the floor above the 3 gators as they snap their teeth beneath him, shouting at the lizard, "You found all the innings so far, fella. Now it's time for Spider-Man to show what he can do." Spidey lands on the tower and begins climbing, saying he's going to climb to the top where he doesn't have to worry about the gators. If we're going to slug it out, we're going to slug it out one-on-one on the roof. At the same time, we see the lizard climbing the tower as he thinks to himself that Spidey's forgotten there are 3,000 lizards on Earth, and C.K. Connors has the powers of them all, adding, "Has he never seen a gecko lizard slither up a wall?" The lizard is maybe a foot behind Spidey on the wall at the base, but reaches the top of the tower while Spidey still has a quarter of it to go. We see the alligators open mouthed beneath Spidey as he stands between them and the lizard, thinking he's trapped. But the gators don't plan on waiting for Spidey to make a decision. Using their tails, they begin pounding the tower's stone walls, and Spidey knows they're trying to collapse the tower. Shooting a web line onto the wall, he pushes off of it and swings around the curve of the tower and through an embrasure. But the lizard is unimpressed. He screams, "Bah! That is nothing!" In the final panel on this page, we see him slithering through a hole in the roof of the fort, crawling down the wall towards Spidey, saying sooner or later he'll destroy him. But Spidey's fearless. He replies, "I want to have a record made of that line. I hear it all the time." And cocks his right fist back. He's ready to dance. He's got 2 fists and the rules ain't changed. Swing him if you got him. but he never gets the chance. The lizard is on him too quickly. Page 17 opens to Spidey trying to web the lizard up, but CK's not having it. He catches the web stream and tears it to shreds, reminding Spidey that the webbing can't hold him, and Spidey says you can't blame a guy for trying. But Spidey thinks he's got to keep the lizard on the move. A lizard on the move can't toss his serum into the swamp, but Spidey has to be confused. The lizard already said on page 15 that he hasn't prepared the serum yet. But I understand. You have a man-sized Komodo dragon bearing down on you. Things get intense. You forget a thing or two. But Spidey hasn't forgotten how to maneuver. He does a side somersault into a nearby room with a large iron door, telling the lizard he may be stronger, but Spidey's not convinced he's faster yet. We see the lizard chase Spidey into the room and Spidey backflips over him. No problem. But looking over his shoulders, he sees the gators trying to enter the room, snapping at his heels. Spidey wonders aloud how they got here so fast, but there's no time for wondering. He slams the door shut and drops the large wooden drawbar on the wall behind it, bolting the door so the alligators can't get in. But the lizard still wants static. Spidey starts scaling the sheer wall and the lizard says, I'm glad you locked the door. Now it's just you and me. And we see him chase Spidey up the wall, no problem, telling Spidey no matter where he goes, the lizard can follow. And that's fine with Spidey. He keeps crawling up the wall. He reaches the top of the tower and now he's backed into a corner. But if you know the Goldenrod Kid, like I know the Goldenrod Kid, you know he does his best work back pressed against the wall. 50 years before the State Farm fisherman Genie told Camille Chin she had to be quicker than that to get a purse, Spidey, spinning a web line, leaps over the lizard, jumping towards him, shouting, "Nice try, but you gotta be faster than that to snag a spider." Somebody tell this giant gecko to call Geico because he's dealing with the golden liability. Page 18 opens to a caption box. As Spider-Man plunges toward the floor below, grasping his life-saving strand of web in one hand, he lunges out skillfully and... As we watch Spidey grab hold of the lizard by the tail, screaming, "Gotcha!" as he falls past him towards the floor of the tower. A floor that for some unknown reason looks like SJB-colored carpet. This comic is madness. We get a great follow-up panel as we see the lizard in free fall. All that strength and no web shooters. How sad. Spidey, now above the lizard, says, "Thanks for joining me, lizard. It gets lonesome tumbling down alone." Releasing his hold on his web line with his left hand and reaching into his Spidey belt with his right. The next panel we see Spidey, his right arm raised, racing towards the lizard from above, thinking he only has one shot to get this right with no do-overs. Does Spidey get the hit? No, because he doesn't throw the vial. Spidey's not taking that chance with the world at stake. He gets up close, he gets personal, and crashing into the lizard from above, puts CK in a headlock and forces the antidote down his throat. He screams, "I did it!" in the next panel, but before he can celebrate, he is punched in the chest by the lizard, who tells Spidey, "Quick or not, your time's run out," and punches the webhead in the chest, sending Spidey flying upside down across the room. In the final panel, we see Spidey grabbing the webbing he used to descend from the ceiling to slow himself down, wondering why his serum isn't working and what could have possibly gone wrong. But Spidey's got problems in the now. With both arms grabbing his webbing, he's left himself open to attack, and the lizard slams his tail into Spidey, who thinks, his tail! It's like a runaway sledgehammer. And Spidey had to just take that to the gut. I'm sure if he wasn't the Amazing Spider-Man, he would have been snapped in half. The lizard is snapping trees in half with his tail, and Spidey just took that boom in the chest. That has to hurt. I know it. We turn to page 19 and find Spidey tangled upside down in his own web, so now we're in the action from the cover. Winded from the lizard's blow to the gut, he's left wide open from an attack by the lizard, who is racing towards him, both hands raised, shouting, "I warned you that you were no match for me, and now we will end this forever." Spidey snaps to just in time in the next panel, and we see him upside down, fighting off the lizard's hands, thinking he can't give up, while the lizard says as soon as Spidey's done, he's dumping his serum into the swamp and the world will be his. But before he can get his hands on Spidey, inches away, we see the lizard hunch over, his head bowed, both hands clutching his forehead. He screams, "My head, my brain, what is happening to me?" The chain starts in his hands first. His dark green complexion gets noticeably lighter before we get another beautiful panel of the lizard transforming through varying stages, from deep green-skinned lizard to a bald lime green hybrid. Then finally, as Dr. C.K. Connors, Mad Doctor, he screams, "I'm human again!" The next panel we see Spidey propping Kurt Connors up as Kurt Connors says, "The nightmare is finally over." And Spidey agrees, noting that Kurt only has one arm again. We see Spidey and Connors exiting the tower together, Spidey shooting a line of web fluid towards the alligator, saying that now that they aren't being controlled by the lizard, it's easy to handle them. But hold on, the lizard has clearly displayed signs of controlling reptiles, taking me all the way back to that moment where Billy was confronted by the snake. Why didn't the lizard just force the snake to leave his son alone? I'll tell you why. Because Kurt Kildare Connors had all this planned from the start. The mouse he was experimenting on never turned lizard. He knew exactly how much of that serum would boost his powers. In the final panel, we see Kurt Connors, Mad Doctor, hugging Martha while Spidey looks on in the doorframe of a sleeping Billy's room. Kurt saying if it wasn't for Spidey, he wouldn't have returned. And it sounds to me like if it wasn't for that pesky Spider-Man, I'd get to be the Lizard forever. With the house! Does nobody see what's going on here? He's pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. Page 20 opens to him holding Martha, telling her, I tampered with forces of nature which must not be tampered with, when I think what might have happened. To which she replies, hush, my darling, it's all over now. You must try to forget it. And Spidey's just standing in the background like, awkward, silently. Next, we see Kurt's left hand over a roaring fire, and he's holding sheets of paper saying that he's going to destroy all his notes. He never wants to repeat his experiments again. He asks Spidey what's the price he has to pay for the terrible things he's done, and Spidey says, you've broken no law, and luckily you were stopped before you could do any harm. I suggest we just keep this whole affair a secret among the three of us. So Spidey's learned his lesson from his fight in front of the jewelry store with the Burba Gang in the King Oswald, King Janitor episode covering ASM number 4. You broke no law? You didn't do anything wrong? Hey, I'm just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I'm not the judge, I'm not the jury, I'm definitely not the executioner. That's Spidey's mentality. Spidey brought the killer of his Uncle Ben in alive. Back to Martha and Kurt each grab one of Spidey's shoulders. Martha says, bless you, while Kurt says, we'll never forget you. And so, the strangest and most poorly executed plot in the history of world domination has come to an end. The next day, we find JJ outside of his hotel. I imagine it's the Hyatt. Why not? And he's talking to a police officer. The officer is telling him that they still haven't found his photographer and asks Jameson if he wants to put out an all-state bulletin. And JJ in his green suit, purple tie, cigar in hand, doesn't answer the question at all. Instead, he says, all I know is I'm paying a fortune in hotel bills and not getting what I came for. The man wastes at least $30,000 to $50,000 a month on billboards, commercials, and ads attacking Spider-Man. But he's upset not about Pete being missing, but his hotel bills. Miserable. In the next panel, Pete comes walking up from behind JJ and the police officer while telling Jameson he's been looking for him, and JJ snaps. He says, you've been looking for me? Why, you brainless incompetent. And Pete, holding up the pics of the lizard in the next panel, says, easy there, Shim. Don't say something you'll regret. Imagine how great these photos are going to look in the paper. JJ, seeing the lizard in the photo, snatches them from Pete immediately. And we get another great panel up close of JJ's face, his eyes staring stage right, and he's asking Pete how he got the pictures. Pete, from off panel, tells JJ he bought them from an Indian guide. And JJ begins tearing the photos up, asking Pete if he can't tell a fake photo from a real one when he sees it, while Pete tells him, don't do that, what are you doing? But I imagine JJ knows the photos are real, but JJ spent enough money in Florida. In the final panel, we get full-on JJ the Tyrader. He screams, his right fist raised, you fool! There is no lizard! The whole thing must have been some sort of publicity stunt. But where is Spider-Man? Why didn't you get some pictures of him? Losing it. But he's not done. On page 21, pointing at Pete, he continues. You and your big talk. You promised me sensational photos, and all you bring me is a batch of worthless fakes. You've wasted enough of my time. Get packed. We're returning to New York. And Pete, his hands out like, what do you want me to do about it? Pete says, fine, I'll pack. In the jet, flying back to the city, Pete asks JJ about the money he owes him, and JJ is not done. He is on the plane, tirading at 50,000 feet. For what? The way I figure it, you owe me for your plane fare down here and half of the hotel bill. Pete makes it through the flight and finally getting home, flops down on his couch, throws a foot up on a footrest and puts his right arm behind his head, and seeing Aunt May says, gee, it's good to be back, Aunt May. May in response, full green dress, white apron, tells Peter not to get too comfortable because she has a ton of chores for him to do since he's so rested from his trip to Florida. The next panel we see Pete phone in hand as he says, rest? I was down there working. But he says, fine, let me call Betty real quick and see if she'll go out with me tomorrow. But remembering Betty's working late, he decides to call Liz instead. He gives her a ring and when she picks up, he says, hi Liz, this is Peter. How about tomorrow night? Straight to the chase, no preamble, no small talk. Let's go ahead and get this note out of the way right now. And Liz doesn't disappoint. We see her on the other line in a red blouse with a high crosshatch collar and she says, Peter Parker, I'll tell you what I told Flash Thompson. I'll thank you not to call and tie up my phone. I'm waiting for a call from Spider-Man. After him rescuing me the other day and calling me Blue Eyes, I'm sure he'll call. And I don't want the line to be busy when my dream man phones. She slammed the phone on Pete in the next panel as he stands, receiver in his right hand, scratching the back of his head with his left. And he says she thinks Spidey has a crush on her, so she's not going to waste any time dating Peter Parker from Doleville. Population, the loneliest number. We're in the evening in the next panel and outside of Jameson's lit corner office, where according to the caption box, Spidey is being discussed here too. We have JJ asking Betty if someone sent something through the mail, to which she replies, yes sir, after all, I guess Spider-Man can mail a letter like anyone else. Quipping. I can see why Pete likes her. In the next panel, we're inside of the office. Betty has on a sequin green turtleneck with her white gold hoops, and she's holding a letter in her hand as JJ stands behind her, wearing a JJP pinstriped suit with red tie, a salty, angry expression, and a raised fist. Betty reads the note out loud, and it says, roses are red, violets are blue. I'm still at large, so phooey to you. Forcing the story to end with another JJ tirade. He screams, "Well, don't just stand there. Tear it up. Burn it. Oh, I'll get that mass menace if it's the last thing I do." Maybe you will, JJ. Maybe you won't. You won't get him in this one, though. The final panel of this issue, we have the Spider-Man head logo filling the panel, the eyes slightly to the right of the box, and the silhouette of a one, Lincoln O. Vulture, with the caption box above it reading, "Editor's Note. Big news. Next issue will feature the sensational return of one of the greatest villains of all, the astounding Vulture. Reserve your copy at your dealers now. See you soon." And that's the issue. This issue was so great to me because it didn't make any sense at all and fully leaned into the cosmic lunacy of comic books. I haven't read very many lizard stories in my life, but they always seem to revolve around the beast within taking control, which has been tried and true before even Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The research I did for this issue proves the lizard may not be too far off. The art in this one was so gorgeous to look at, beautiful to look at. I got distracted so many times just admiring the simplicity and beauty of it. Definitely fun to look at, definitely fun to read. This week's bonus episode is Fallen Angel number 26, the action-packed conclusion to the Red Horse riding storyline, and can be found in the vault at patreon.com/HSPP for patrons of the Key Keepers and High Council tiers. Amazing Spider-Man number 7 is of course next in line, but as it was the first Spidey comic and comic book I ever read, it was the first bonus episode here, titled One Man's Trash, and you can find it in the vault at patreon.com/HSPP for the Key Keeper and High Council tiers once again. Sign up today and find out why Lincoln O. Vulture will forever be in my top 5 supervillains all time, dead or alive. Next week, in our 8th episode, we set the numbering straight, covering ASM number 8, Spider-Man, the terrible threat of the living brain. Spidey goes one-on-one with the world's fastest processor. If that ain't enough, we get the grudge match we've been waiting for as the Goldenrod Kid steps into the squared circle with none other than Spider-Flash Thompson himself, the Brand X Wonder. And if you still need convincing, Spidey hits the beach, but the fun in the sun turns into a weekend scorcher as he runs afoul of Sifu Hot Rod himself, A1 Johnny, the Human Torch, in a short tale titled Spider-Man Tackles the Torch. 2 infinities and 3 stories. If you know 8 like I know 8, you'll be back. With all that said, thanks for running with me today. It's always appreciated. Please like, please comment, please subscribe, please share, please take care, and please think of the world and be true to yourself. And remember, with great power, you already know the rest. You know it. Make sure you're being responsible. I'm out of here.